welcome to the Buncombe County Health and Human Services Board meeting. In accordance with State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearances of conflicts of interest. Do any of you have either of those to report? Hearing none. You received the minutes of the August board meeting. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for their approval.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the August 2015 board meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And I think everybody remembered that we had flu shots upstairs. Did everybody remember that? Because they're there if you need to run up and get that. They don't hurt you, I promise.
And where do we go?
404, and they're gonna hang out, so y'all are good.
Okay.
Ellis is gonna be on.
We have a number of guests today. We're glad to have all of you here. We're particularly grateful to have the county manager with us today. Wanda, thank you for being here. And we have two of our commissioners, Ellen Frost and Joe Belcher. We're grateful for your attendance and your interest in the topic. We have other guests. I ask Board Member Kaiser to introduce her guests for us.
Sure. This is Ashley Henson, who is a student here on the satellite campus of the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy. And she is one of our Rural Scholars, which is the program that I work with at the school. And so coming to board meetings and participating in community activities and civic engagement is a part of their core curriculum. So she's here with me today.
Thank you.
And she's a local, grew up in Candler.
And you can see all of the people at the table, except Commissioner Belcher, are members of HHS. So you'll know, you can see their names. He doesn't have a name over there, that's why he's one of our esteemed guests. But all of these are board members, and a couple more may be coming in. So we're glad to have you here, and glad to get young people involved.
Yes, I'm training her to be a future board member. You know, every board needs a pharmacist.
And there's some other guests, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves to us right quick, if you will. Back here.
Bob Martin, I'm a Buncombe County Planning.
Hey, Bob, welcome.
Nancy Longbrook, Buncombe County Planning Board.
And then the front row here. Yeah, Cindy.
Cindy Weeks with Mountain Housing Opportunities.
Scott Dedman, Mountain Housing Opportunities.
I'm Heather Dillashaw. I'm the Community Development Manager for the City of Asheville.
Brian Alexander with Northbound Western North Carolina.
Any others? Well, welcome to all of you. We're always glad to have you here, and your presence indicates your interest in the items that are on our agenda. And Mandy is going to give us a statement of how we end up where we are and some background information.
I thought about how to frame the intro today and just remind the board that in July we did some strategic planning and board members talked about the issues they were most interested in us covering. Clearly, when the commissioners appointed this board, there are requirements in the law, as Stephanie pointed out, about fields of expertise, but we looked for very broad thinkers, people who understood the connectedness of issues in our community and brought that broader headset. I think this board has certainly proven its ability to do that. And I make that point because I want to introduce the topic today in a term that's used all over management right now, but particularly in terms of social service, human service strategy, which is a wicked problem. Now, while wicked is not my favorite term, this really fits. It implies it tends to be an issue communities pull back from because it seems so big and so complex and so costly, and there are so many opinions about which way to move forward. I think what this board said is those are the very issues we want to tackle. And what makes this board able to do that is one of our roles is to be that safe container where we can look at complex issues. We're not the funders or the policymakers on a state or local level. Our job is to inform those policy members about gaps in our community. So it's the perfect forum to allow other members of our community to join us, for us to learn from each other and engage in conversation and exchange creative ideas. I offer that because we're gonna focus on this issue for the next 3 board meetings. And it is not the intent that we come out of here with a perfect plan. That's not our job. It's our intent that we expose ourselves to the data and information and the strategies other communities are learning, best practices, and the ideas that this group collectively has, and that we share those in this learning environment with our elected officials, our policymakers, our experts in this field. So just wanted to offer that headset. You are gonna, and Don's gonna talk about that, we are gonna try, as we move through these meetings, to try to view it through the eyes of individuals, and you're gonna meet some individuals through some video interviews that'll help you do that. And I'll turn it over to Don.
Okay, thank you very much. Affordable housing and homelessness is a problem everywhere in the world. We think we have the resources in Buncombe County to actually do something about this issue. We have people at the city council who are interested. We have Buncombe County commissioners who are interested. And we have the private and nonprofit organizations interested in this, as represented by some of the people at the table immediately behind me. So we're dedicated over the next 3 months to take a serious look at it in Buncombe County. Today we will be hearing an overview of economic and housing data. I told Tom that I'm becoming a Tom Tveidt groupie because Tom is able to capture for us in numerical fashion information that we need to begin to make decisions about where we go. So I'm expecting, if it's as usual, Tom, that all of it won't be good news, that there may be some news in here that we need to attend to in another manner. But we're going to hear Tom do that presentation for us, and I don't think he's a stranger to any of you because he was here probably about 8 months ago and did another presentation for us. And as a result of that, sidebar, we had him at AB Tech to make that connection with the same data because other organizations can use that data. Tom is a research economist. When you say economist, we often don't think of research being there, but he's the one who actually comes up with all the numbers that gives us information that we can use to make wise decisions. So I'll stop talking. We're going to begin by meeting 5 people who live in our community: Kayla, Crystal, Roger, Brian, and Kendra. You have a sheet in front of you with their photographs on it. We're going to talk about their unique experiences because these are faces, so that one of the things that I like is if you look at the United States Congress, they always get the numbers, but then they always bring in 3 or 4 people who tell them how these numbers impact them directly, and that's really what we're doing. We're going to hear the numbers, but I want you to keep the lens focused on the fact that we're dealing with people. So let's hear from these folks. Okay.
I moved to Asheville a couple years ago to get clean and start my life over with. I picked this place because there's a lot of construction, and so that's what I do. I'm a carpenter, and I moved up here and hopefully to get a good job, but it took me a while to get a good job up here.
I'm originally from Harlan, Kentucky. I've been here since 2008. I have 3 children, ages 6, 7, and 12, and I live here with my fiance.
Born and raised in Marion, Ohio. Got a BS in Ed degree from Capital University. Went on a kind of a quest. Ended up at Esalen Institute, actually very appropriate because I've got my Esalen jacket on here. And got taken with the massage program there and got certified in massage in '84.
Well, I am a 34-year-old student. I'm studying applied science and paralegal law. I have no children. I just recently lost my father at the beginning of June. I have a 13-year-old brother who has come with that package.
Well, I am 25 and I graduated from Appalachian State University with a hospitality and tourism degree, and I moved to Asheville hoping to pursue massage therapy, and ended up not going that route, but I love Asheville even though I grew up on the beach.
I'm a carpenter. I do finish work, anything to do with wood, any kind of cutting or anything. That's pretty much what I specialize in.
Well, right now, again, I'm just taking some time off with the adjustments, and it's kind of hard to study law and to work at the same time. But I kind of do cleaning, house cleaning for people for stipends, monthly stipends, and that kind of just helps me with my household.
I do mainly reception work at the desk, so answering phones, greeting clients.
I'm a dual-skilled CNA, so sometimes I read heart monitors, sometimes I do direct patient care, and then sometimes I'm a health unit coordinator.
I'm on Social Security disability, well, on Social Security retirement now. They converted me over to retirement when I reached age 66.
I pay child support, and that pretty much takes 30–40% of my check. And to be able to save up for a deposit for the house, the deposit for your electric bill, and everything else all the overhead money you need is just so hard to come up with. Being homeless and not making that much money per hour, it's just almost impossible for the situation I was in.
So when I first moved here, coming from like a small town where everything is pretty much affordable because pretty much everyone there is basically poor, it just shocked me whenever I found out like the prices of rent, just to be able to rent like a 1 or 2 bedroom place here. So I stayed with like friends for like a little bit because I couldn't find anywhere that was affordable enough for myself and my family.
When I first moved here, it was a little difficult because I really wanted to find a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment, which was completely out of my price range. So I was just living at my friend's house and essentially couch surfing between a few friends.
It was gut-wrenching because, again, some places what they would call affordable were $500 and $600 a month on top of the expenses for utilities and your everyday household needs. I couldn't afford it. So it was just like, wow, you can't do it.
I was able to find a place to stay on Craigslist, an apartment to share. Basically, I lived in a bedroom. And it was not a very great situation. Well-meaning person, but lots of issues, and I just felt spinning. I just felt very ungrounded.
And with that, we roll right into Tom. Tom, welcome again to our meeting.
That was perfect. Ready for me then? It's good to be back. That was a perfect intro, by the way. That was perfect. As you remember what I did before, a lot of numbers and charts and not much personality to anything I Is this, oh, perfect. So let me just back up a little bit, and Mandy, your introduction almost took my wind from my sails away. I was in Smithfield, North Carolina about, I guess, last month sometime, and I was there requested by a very large national company that does gap analysis for schools. What kind of classwork should community college? I was there. Smithfield or Johnston Community College was the community college, and they wanted to know what classes. And so they talk about course gaps. And so you would think, wasn't that kind of easy? You just figure out how many people there are and what they want to do and what jobs there are in that industry. And this national company gave me a call. They've been doing this for about 30 years. And they said, as we do this, the more we do this, we realize that it's so many different pieces to this pie, and it's never going to be an easy equation. So would you go out there and spend 3 days with the community college and the board of directors and stuff, and then take that information and shoot it back to us? And I thought that's very much what we're looking at here. You know, people talk about affordability or the housing gap, and you would think, oh, isn't that just a simple number you put in here? But there's just so many moving parts to it. So what I'm going to be talking about today are just some of those parts, and hopefully educate you in the bigger picture. I won't answer the questions for you. There's no answer really out there. I know that, I don't know if any of you have seen the Bowen report that was done for the city. That had a lot of data, but it didn't go to some of the areas that I'm going to talk on. So that's sort of the context. There's not going to be an answer at the end here. It's just going to be, here's some factors that are unique about this area that actually play a role in affordability, I think. And hopefully it'll go together and make a better decision for decision makers as we go along. That being said, I was telling the good folks here, Rachel, who I sent my stuff to this morning, and Krista, they know that I always futz with this stuff to the very last minute, and I was adding and taking away slides. And after I sent it, I realized I don't have a slide with sources, which is always, I don't like putting the sources on each slide because it makes them sort of hard to read. But I will send you that if any of you would need that. It's almost all government data, and I'll try to point out where I get it, just FYI. So let's talk. I have a couple slides about housing. I'm not a housing expert. I don't know if there is a housing expert. Probably a realtor would be a housing expert. But I thought, let's talk in context. I've got 3 or 4 slides just about housing here. And I think if nothing else, you can sort of check off some things that maybe aren't the big drivers to the problems with affordability, and maybe there's not a problem with affordability. I have a couple slides. We'll talk about that. This is a great slide that I think only I own this information because I've been collecting it since back at the chamber days, and it's just quarterly number of homes sold. It's Buncombe and Madison. That's just the way it's reported. And then the average home price, or the average home price there of a home. So you can see sort of the long-term trends. You can see the housing bubble impact there. And you can also see the last bar out there is, I think, 1,115 homes were sold in the most recent quarter, which I could not find that ever happening here before. So there's a lot of homes being sold, more so ever now in this last quarter than maybe in the history of the county. I don't know what that means. There's a lot of activity. But the thing that I really wanted to point out with the idea about affordability is the price. And one thing at the aggregate level, obviously we're looking at all homes being sold, is there has not been a lot of upward pressure on price. You would think that would be just part of the whole game here. I think what you and I recognize, there are certain neighborhoods and price ranges that are very active and a lot of price appreciation, but overall, if you stand back, that's not the big issue. The big issue doesn't seem to be runaway price appreciation. I was looking at the Beverly Hanks report this morning, and I think a home in the 100 to 200 to 300 range, there's probably about 3 to 4 months of inventory, not much. But you get up into the million plus, and there's about 5 years of inventory. So these numbers are probably a little bit skewed by that. But just something you should know going into this, you know, if you say the problem is because prices are going nuts, it doesn't seem to be that way. This is the same thing, and I've just charted it out. The change each quarter from the previous quarter, this same quarter the year before. And as you can see, the price is the red line there. Not a lot going on, at least in the last year or so. In fact, actually, it's negative 1% right now.
Can you back up one slide
I
just
can.
to
Sure.
just give a 30-second comment?
Sure.
Because I do know something about it.
Okay.
From 2008 to 2012, you'll see a dramatic drop in these prices that occurred. And during that time, you've got a lot of foreclosures that are occurring. So it's not necessarily that these are, you know, new affordable priced homes that's at the market. You know, and once you come out of that foreclosure, you know, washing out, which has happened many times in our history, that you'll gradually start seeing prices stabilize. That's why you see, you know, one of the things that affects that big dip and the dropping in prices. Not necessarily that there's a tremendous amount of affordable homes being built. It's just that there's a lot of lower priced homes being sold.
Excellent. By the way, that's a good point. This is, I'm not making a presentation as much as a conversation, so if anybody has anything that they want to ask or add, please. Is there still quite a bit of foreclosure activity going on right now?
Nowhere near as much. You're always gonna have some, but nothing like that.
And when you say 3 or 4 months inventory on lower priced houses, you mean they could likely sell it in 3?
Right. So what I'm saying is that market, I'm giving you average prices, but we all know there's markets that are probably a lot more active than this would show. I mean, you think about West Asheville, I'm sure the West Asheville market's probably a hot market. I don't know how it is. So, give you some trend ideas. This is data from Zillow. Now, this is sort of an interesting, I won't spend too much time explaining why I love this data because I'm a data guy, but this is non-governmental free data, and you just download it, and I've called them up and they say, please use everything you can. So it's not polished and clean like most data I will show you, but the reason I'm showing it to you is because it gives you some context. The red line is Buncombe County, and I went into Zillow, by the way, and there's about 1,000 homes at any given time that are, or I'm sorry, about 4,000 homes that are on the market on Zillow out there. And this shows you, these are the other counties that they have enough data they're willing to show, which is 37 other counties. And something you probably already know, but it's important for you to see that the Buncombe County is up there towards the very top of a medium sold price. And those are, by and large, the largest counties or the counties where there's the most activity. Up there, if I were to actually put it, the names next, those little charts next to us, would be Wake and Orange. And then some of the out there on the coast, Carteret and Moore and Pender. Actually, Moore is Pinehurst. So we're along with some very high flying other counties, whether they're tourist counties or major employment areas.
Out of curiosity, do you know who some of the lower counties are?
Well, I do know. No, I don't. I mean, I didn't
Okay.
remember who they were. I can definitely look it up. By the way, and that's another thing. I don't know if I mentioned. I'm going to be here for the next 2 meetings, so I won't be presenting. But unless you have enough data for me to present. But if there's anything that we're doing here, this is sort of a shotgun thing. I thought maybe this is what we're looking for. Maybe there's more things that I didn't, that you're interested in that I'm not going to share that I might actually know about. So if there's something that you'd like me to go out and find for you, I like finding the data as much as I like sharing the data.
You know, I'm thinking what would be interesting is to compare that with the income, the median income
that would be
counties. It's really interesting.
Okay. See, this is why I don't get the slides to the very last minute. And here's the same thing, value per square foot, and as you can see in this case, actually Buncombe County for the 15 North Carolina counties is number 1, and then Orange is right next to it, and you can see it's actually going up a little bit. But the major point of sharing this slide is yes, costs are high relative to these other counties at the very top of it. I would be interested, I don't want to put you in the spot, but would you say topography or what would be a driver back here?
I mean, you know, it's, our counties like, it's a resort county, you have the mountains, and so, you know, prices of properties have been driven up, and prices of homes, and the type of homes that are built, and that has driven it up over years, so. And some of that is, the grading is extensive, a lot of the homes that are built down there.
I know I did some work in Wilmington here last year, and they've got a ton of inventory because land is so flat there that during the housing bubble, they were building like crazy, whereas, you know, we couldn't get away with it like they could. Now they're sort of stuck with it.
Do you have cost numbers for those? Cost to build in a?
No, not from this site, at least. There might be other sources I can get cost. And this is rent. I'll be talking more about rent through the rest of my presentation. And here this is the only slide that really shows a jump here. It's just within 2015 where the big jump is. Where we're up, the two other communities above us there that have higher monthly rent, by the way, the number is $1,425. And the only other two above us are Orange and Union, so the Charlotte and Chapel Hill. Now, because this isn't government data, this is just people put their stuff on here. So I would imagine with the rental units, you're probably going to get more of the higher end stuff. Your regular bedroom in the back or garage kind of stuff is not going to be listed on Zillow, so there might be a little bit of a bias there, but that's going to be the same bias
So is there any way you can go back, you got some as 37 counties, 50 counties, 27 county, it varies though. Is there some way for you to define for us in that number, if it's east, west, or even delineate the counties so that we can do some cross comparisons? Because it'd be really nice to know what counties are in all of these graphs as we're doing comparisons for an apples to apples, especially in regards to the west.
Well, I may be able to color code the western ones or something like that.
That would be great. Just something to give us a better idea for our region and
You're
how.
never going to get rid of me here.
Everybody, this is gonna be a grouping before it's done.
Well, it's cool data. It's really nice to
is.
have it, so you can really define.
Well, and it's interesting, this one too, this is the last one of these to throw up and scare you with, but this is medium rent. It's 93 cents, by the way, for rent per square foot. But I thought what was interesting here is up toward the top is Haywood County. Now, I'm from Haywood County. There's not a lot of rental activity in Haywood County at all, or even the rentals. And so, that might reflect just demand or lack of supply as much as the actual cost. And then you have a couple coastal counties and Orange up there as well.
So does it differentiate seasonal rentals versus year-round rentals? Again, because in my mind, that's a different population.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at Zillow. Now, it's not A, B, or A.
That would be really good, and Haywood, of course, does have a lot of seasonal.
Yeah. Although, we're looking at, this is every month.
Yeah.
So it's pretty consistent month over month, every month. Good questions. Okay, now we're going to switch. That was sort of the introduction. So what does housing look like around here? As I said, not a housing expert, but you can kind of see that we are obviously biased towards cost, at least, towards the higher end in the state. The HUD and the Census Bureau, and I think it's rather clever, and probably those of you that know more about housing than I do, have come up with a way to define if somebody is rent burden, they call it, and that is when the rent takes up 30% or more of your household income. So you're going to be seeing that again and again, and that's just a way to sort of define affordability. And I think it's pretty accurate. In fact, I did some research, and it actually says, there's so many people already paying that maybe they ought to bump it up even more because, and we have some slides on that. But it gives you sort of a starting point. And so what you'll see here is the number of homes in Buncombe County, 2005 to 2014, that have rent that are household is paying more than 30%. And you can see that it's increased. There's a bit of a margin in error here, so these numbers, you don't want to get too excited over each year change, but you can see over this period of time there definitely has been an increase in the number of homes, about 46% increase. And then I looked at, if you look at the percentage of homes is 46% of homes would fall, rental homes would fall into that. Yeah.
So one of the things that would be interesting, I think, when we think about the economics of this, is there's a big difference between 30% of someone's rent if they make $60,000 a year, as opposed to someone who's on minimum wage who makes $15,000 a year. And so I would be interested, I think for this to matter, when we look at affordable housing, that the income of the household matters in how we talk about that. I don't know if you can go into that.
I have a slide that is going to address that.
Great, thanks.
And just a point of clarity on that 30% or greater, is that a national definition?
Yeah, it is a national.
Okay,
And
I
HUD
just
uses
missed that.
And those of you like Scott, is that what everybody uses?
Yes.
I thought so.
It's pretty well industry-wide standard.
It's a great indication.
And this will all subsidy require, all affordable housing subsidy goes by that.
So when further on here, I'm going to be explaining the census data. That's the one piece, that's the one question I can pull out of any sort of census data and cross-tabulate it to anything else. And you'll see, I gave you some ideas here, but it's really a great way to say, okay, who really are these people? Who are we talking about?
And this is 30% of the household income for average Buncombe County income?
No, for that household. So they would actually, this is census data where they said, ask the householder.
So a lower cost rental house compared to that person's income?
Yeah, it's just compared to what they're paying. How much of their household are they paying? So here is a percent of household income, and this is, as you see here, I broke it out into the different ranges. So that they call it moderate burden, and then severe burden is when you're paying 50% or more of your income, household income, for your rent, which obviously would be fairly significant. And the little bars, the red bars, so what happened? This is the first time they do it, and I hate to get in the weeds here, but so the Census Bureau does an ongoing survey. They don't do that. Remember that decennial survey? They still have a decennial survey for the short form, and those of us that are older will remember the long form. They, instead of sending out the long form every 10 years, they send it out all the time to a small group, so that over a 5-year period, they have what equals the old decennial census. So I'm comparing 2005, 2009 to the most current, which is 2009, 2013. They're 5-year periods. They don't say they're averages, but they kind of think of them as averages. So I'm saying what happened between the last time they did it and the most current, and the differences are the red. That'd be what happened, and as you can see, it increased, and it, on the high side, the low side decreased. So the number of homes, this is actually the number of homes down below here, that saw an increase. So you can see that it really moved its way up across the board. Overall, let's see, 48%, the 40 to 49, that increased 38%, the number of households that went rent burdened from 40 to 49, almost a severe increase. And then down below there's the 25 to 29, they're working their way there, that increased by 26%. So there's obviously been, over this period of time, a movement towards more people having their rent burden increased. And at the lower end, it's actually decreased.
What's the bottom, what was that bottom line, what's it stand for, the 1,000, 2,000?
Oh, that's people's, or households, I'm sorry, household, rented
that's
household. Good point. There's always a struggle between adding a bunch of stuff to a slide and making it too busy and then maybe not having enough. So here's, I think, what we were talking about before. This is by, this is percent 35%. Unfortunately, they didn't do the 30, they did 35 here by household income groups. And then I did the change. Now, the important thing here, the interesting thing that I thought is the change in the higher incomes, or the median incomes. So you can see the 20 to 34,999 had the largest increase in being rent burdened. So a way to look at this is it's sort of working its way into higher incomes. That would be a way to interpret it. It increased in the lower incomes too. It was already, obviously a lot of folks already were there, a lot of households, but it's really pushing its way up. So, you know, I think about even the people we just saw in that video, which obviously you don't know a lot about them, but they didn't look like they were the very, very lowest of the lowest. They were people that were working and contributing, and they may very likely be in some of these higher areas. So everybody understand what that shows there? I thought that was very significant here. It's a movement of unaffordability or rent burden up into higher income levels. Now we're going to talk, this is an area where I'm much more comfortable, and this is employment. And this is important to see here. This is just total employment, Buncombe County, and I overlaid the recession over that so you can see that it's pretty clear when the recession ended at the end of 2009 that things took off, and we have really been growing very strongly. We're growing at about a 4.5% rate, annual rate right now, which is very strong. And we, I'm trying to think of the, I think, see, we're 5,000 jobs over where we were previous our previous peak at the bubble there back in 2007. So we're way past that, and we're kind of chugging along at a very strong pace. I didn't want to get too much into this because we could spend half a day on this, but you know, we're doing very well relative to other communities in the state. I'm working in Henderson County right now. They asked me to do an economic assessment. They're nowhere near back to pre-recession. I mean, they are having a hard time.
Is this full-time employment?
This is just a job is a job, yeah. Good question, yeah. This is from the state who shares their data with the federal government, and a job is a job. So if you had 2 jobs, you could do that. But it's still very strong. It's been about 5 years. We've been growing almost nonstop for 5 years. So incredible job growth right now. Job growth is not the problem right now. It is. This is average weekly industry wage, and this is just an industry, what the industry pays on average. Now, inflation adjusted it just so it wouldn't look like it's all growing, to be a little bit more realistic here. And you can see, and I have a couple more slides that detail this further. There has not been a lot of upward activity going on with Buncombe County, and maybe you're surprised, maybe you're not, that we're that much lower than the state and the nation, as it has been probably for decades. I remember I was in my office and the phone rang here. This was probably about 4 years ago, and it was a media person. And there had been a recent release of some numbers on wages, and the person was here, by the way. Been here for a long time. You would recognize the name if I told you. And they said, "Am I reading these right? Because our wages are really low." And I said, "Yeah, they are, you know, relative to the state and the nation, and a lot of the nation, other places in the nation, we historically have been." And this person, media person, was very surprised, and I said, "We never knew that, you know." And sometimes, you know, we hear good news, and there is a lot of good news, and it's a cool place, and everybody loves Asheville, and there's a lot of building going on. But it's the kind of thing that really hasn't moved a whole lot around here, and that is wages. I have a couple slides that's going to take a stab at it. I don't think it's conclusive. There's a lot of history in this as well. It's where we live. It's what we do primarily. It's the size of the community as well. So here I went back to 2004 just to do 10 years of it and to say, okay, this has the recession in there as well. You know, if you take out inflation, what really happened? So it went up about $16 over that period of time. But you can see the nation or the state didn't as well. By the way, the nation has not released, I don't think, its latest numbers, right? Wasn't able to find those for this, but you can see that the trajectory. And as anybody who's listened to any of the presidential candidates, they will tell you that this is a problem. So it's not unusual. It's just we haven't kept up with even the areas like the state and the nation that are not doing well at all. So it's a problem everywhere, but it's even exasperated here in Buncombe County. Here's 2010. Remember, I mentioned that since 2010 we've really been adding a lot of jobs and growing like crazy, but guess what? Hasn't really budged the needle much on wages at all. A lot more jobs, but the average wage is about 3% is the only change there. So here's another sobering one. This is the top 20th counties by employment size. The big guys, we're one of the big guys there. But I ranked us for our, this is inflation adjusted, is $728 a week is what the average is. And as you can see, we're down there towards the bottom. Mecklenburg and Durham are each about $1,400. So there's quite a gap, almost double what we are there. And then you can see the state and the nation as well. In the state overall, we're 22nd. So if you ranked every single county, you know, of course, you know, North Carolina has a lot of little dinky counties. So we're still up towards the top. I mean, the top 25%. But we're not a player when it comes to size. This is a way, and I might have shown you something similar last time. It's a little bit detailed, but it makes sense. The sizes of the bubbles are industry, the number of folks in an industry. So the bigger the bubble, the more people in the industry. So you can see who the big players are. Probably you knew that already. And then the bubbles, as they move along the horizontal is they're adding jobs or they're losing jobs. So anybody on this side, that industry has lost jobs since 2010, or they haven't gained it back. And there's fewer and fewer. If you were to animate this, you'd see these things moving along. And then what I think is interesting to us is going up and down, that's that average weekly wage. So you can see the big growth at the bottom, accommodations in food services, retail trade, and administrative services, which is primarily temp agencies would be administrative services. That's where the real growth has been on the lower wage end, and then the growth in the higher end is healthcare, followed by manufacturing, and then professional and political services. I use these in all the communities I go to because every place is different, and it's kind of like, I think of them as the fingerprint of what's happening there. There's a lot that can be explained with wages and growth by this. Also, I tell people, and I've been doing this for years, is so what's going on with Asheville? How do you understand Asheville's economy? And this would be the easiest way. You know, it's healthcare, it's accommodations and food services, which is tourism, which ties directly into retail trade. Administrative services, by the way, is kind of a outlier. That's happening nationwide, and it's probably companies who don't want to hire employees because they don't want to pay for all the stuff that comes with an employee. So that's happening elsewhere. They're not well paid, though, those folks. A lot of them in manufacturing, supposedly. So this chart here, this is another way of showing this chart. I broke out the industries a little bit more detailed into wage quartiles, meaning that the bottom 25% industries that pay in the bottom 25%, the middle 50%, and then the top 25%. And I looked and said, okay, so what's happened over since 2010? And so you can see the bottom 25% has had the most growth. That would be those ones you saw there at the bottom, the retail sales, the food and accommodations. That's where the bottom is. That's where most of the growth has been. Not all the growth. I did this a few years ago, and there was no growth in the middle. A lot of healthcare plays into the middle part there, so there's been some good growth there. And I think trucking and warehousing and that kind of stuff gets in that middle as well. So here we are, here's the industries, the major industries, and I've ranked them all for their average weekly wage, and you can see the bottom ones are responsible for about 54% of the net new jobs. And you can see the difference in the top and the bottom, pretty wide difference between those. And this is even more interesting. I should probably go back and tell you that agriculture is agriculture support, and the growth is real minuscule there. Other services are things like barbershops, beauty salons, and that kind of stuff. And after the recession, almost everywhere saw a lot of that, which is people probably doing that on their own or just a few people together coming up with that. This is a technical thing, and I want to get this across because I think this is really important. So I just showed you there's been a lot of growth in those industries. So then sort of the question maybe in the back of your mind is, so is that an area that we're already really strong in, or do we already have a lot of people in there? So what you can do is you can look at the percent of employment of an industry nationwide, and then you can compare that percent locally. So you could say, what percent of people are in the arts, entertainment, and recreation nationally and locally? And there's a whole field of science. It gets very complex. It's all about the idea of clustering, specialization, and every place specializes in something. And in my economic development work, you usually find what the community is specializing in, what they're good at, and then you run with it. You try to build with it. So what I'm pulling out here is of those bottom industries, the ones that are red, we are highly specialized in, meaning we have a high concentration. So let me explain. Arts, entertainment, and recreation, we only have a little over 2,000 people in it. It's not that many. By the way, that's like zoos, museums, that sort of thing. But it's 19% greater than you would expect nationwide. So we have something special. We probably know that already. And then you look at the bottom two, and it really jumps out. You look at the retail trade, 15% greater. So employment in the retail trade industry is 15% greater here than it is nationwide. There's If you think there's a lot of stores here and more than other places, you're absolutely right. There is. And then the one that really jumps out is accommodations and food services, hotels and restaurants. There's 16,228 people right now. It's almost 50% greater concentration of that employment here in this area. So that's obviously something we do really good at, we specialize in. Now, we're talking about this in the context of affordability, and so I would be remiss not to mention that we're also specialized in healthcare. We have about 38% more people employed in healthcare than we do nationwide. And each one of these industries is sort of like an accordion. You could pull it out and break it down. So manufacturing, we have little areas like textiles. We are very highly specialized in textiles, electronics. It doesn't show up at this aggregate level. And interestingly enough, I just thought it would be fun. I took accommodations and food services and I split the two apart to see, maybe make sure I say this right. It's pretty amazing. It would be, restaurants are about 40%, so 40% greater restaurants, but accommodations, hotels were about 90%. So almost double the concentration of that industry here than elsewhere, which I think anybody would guess is probably only going to increase.
That's why we need more hotels.
Yeah. Are these 16,228, these Buncombe County residents?
That's gonna be you get to hold your breath to the very end.
All right.
Those are just jobs in Buncombe County. And no, they're not, just residents. So anyway, this is an important slide, just so you know, okay, there's where the growth was in those low-paying jobs, and that's what we're good at. That's what we specialize in. So that's, usually you sort of run with what you're good at. You know, I'm not really big about making forecasts. I've been here 20 years, and I can tell you this has been a growing area for that 20 years, and probably will continue to be a growing area.
So when you talk about 20 years, and you say it's a growing area, do we have the same trends? When you look at this 5 years ago, would I see the same type of graph showing the same areas?
Yes and no. Some areas you would. We used to be a lot more specialized in manufacturing, but that's gone down. It's gone down nationwide, but we're still.
That was prior than 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I mean, this has not changed as far as those red. We're 10 years we were good at that stuff. We're growing a lot faster right now than we have been. I don't know if it's ever, but I wouldn't be surprised if we sort of have a lot of momentum in those areas. So there's a lot of growth. Good question. And here I just picked those out. So here's the actual number of jobs, and you can see zeroed out at 2010, post-recession, and you can see that accommodation and food services has exploded, and retail trade has followed along pretty closely. So now, everybody hang with me there. I'm going to try to, I got a lot more stuff here, but I'll try to go as fast as I can. No one's asleep yet. So we talked about already how average wages may not be the best way to measure what people are making. I always say people in the tourism industry, many of them are part-timers, and so that doesn't seem quite fair when you're comparing average weekly wages to somebody who's working 40 to 45 hours to somebody who's working in tourism or a restaurant who's working part-time. So to get around that, I'm going to talk about median hourly occupation wages, and this is really what if somebody asks you what you do, you'd probably tell them your occupation as opposed to your industry. The data isn't as good. It's an estimate. It's a survey. The jobs data that I showed you before is actual census. It's actual the data collected directly from companies. So this numbers aren't as precise, but they're still pretty good. You can see, again, we are below the state and the nation. Probably no surprise, $14.49 would be the median. This isn't the average, it's the median. And I did the same thing with the counties, the top by size. You can see there that we're 16th or so towards the bottom. Almost the same position as we were with wages. And what I didn't put at the top is Durham is about $20.88. They're the highest paid in the state. So the spreads aren't as wide as you would see in average weekly wages, but we still are in the same relative position. Now, next is is a shocker here. This is if I take inflation out, you can see that not only did we not keep up, but we actually lost. Not a huge amount, but everybody did, but we're down about 57 cents on the average occupation, hourly occupational wage. So not going anywhere and declining a little bit. And then here is the same thing I've done with occupations. They come in groups. There's occupational groups that pretty much match up with industries. But you can see it's a little bit easier to see. And what you might want to notice is most occupations haven't done a lot of movement at all. They're all I didn't even put names on them because it's just too confusing. They're all kind of bundled up around going nowhere. And as you can see, there's sales, food preparation and serving, and then you've got transportation. What's interesting here, just as a sidebar, coming from economic development, manufacturing is the end of all ends. And what you don't see is one of those little bubbles in there is called production, which production workers are usually in manufacturing, almost always. But manufacturing over the years, there's fewer and fewer actually production people in manufacturing. So manufacturing as an industry, wages are going up, but when you look at the people in the manufacturers, there's going to be more people doing engineering and highly skilled, highly paid, and they're going to help that average. But the actual man or woman doing the production, putting number one to two, is not seeing a big wage increase. I did some work in Alabama, and there was in that county, adjoining county, it was Chambers, Alabama. There's a Kia plant, and there's another automotive plant, which I'm sorry, I can't remember. Hyundai. And believe it or not, the production workers were not making a lot. I mean, most of them were making under $12 an hour. Now, the people on the engineering side were doing great. So you got to be careful, those of you that are involved with economic development, that a manufacturer is not a manufacturer always. It's what the people are doing inside that building. And here's the same thing that I did before with the industry wages. And this scary bit is the middle 50% middle of wages, as far as occupational wages, have not gained yet, and almost the vast majority is bottom. And here they are. It's our famous friends again, sales and related and food preparation and serving, which are responsible when we're measuring occupations for 61% of the net new jobs since 2010. And here they are, and it should look somewhat similar to what I showed you before with the industry. Now, what I did is I'm calling these high growth, low wage occupations. And what I was able to do, and I thank you for giving me the chance to do this, is there's a way to go in the back door of the Census Bureau's data and actually download the raw data. And so I can start looking at just those groups, sales, food preparation and serving, and see if there's something unique about them and some of the issues we're talking about. Hopefully this will make sense. So here's average hours worked per week by occupation. I broke out all occupations and then those two areas, the sales and the food and serving. So this is something that I've wanted to know for years, and you gave me the opportunity to spend some time and figure it out. As you can see, 50% of them are part-timers, so that makes a big difference. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but actually see the numbers, that's really what it is. And a little sidebar, the 2012, 2013, I just took 2 years because I'm using the raw data, and just took 2 years of data for Buncombe County and divided it by 2 just to make sure that it wasn't biased towards 1 year. So getting back, just sort of follow the line here. This is where the job growth has been. These are the area where most of the new jobs have come from since 2010, and a good majority of them, 50% of them, are part-timers. If you look at where they live, 44% are in a non-single family structure, meaning they're in either an apartment, a mobile home, or trailer, which is greater than everybody else for those other occupations. I guess it's 30% for the average, and 44%, so it's a little bit of a bias. Maybe not as much as a bias as you thought, and I'll help explain that in a minute here. This is tenure by occupation. And here again, you can see the difference is a much more highly likelihood of being a renter, 45% to 30%. But I was interested that they're still in homes that are owned, clear and free and all. One thing to think about, and I have one slide about it, and this is one of those things where you make a policymaker, you've got to be careful. These are not all people living by themselves in homes. I don't have it as a slide, and I think I wrote it down. The percentage that are 32% of high growth, low wage occupations are sons of daughters in households. So these people are just part of a household. My kids have done it, and maybe your kids have as well. So you have to be careful every now and then because there are workers, multiple workers in the household. Some of these people are in a household that might have good income, and we don't. It's going to be almost impossible for us to pull that out. And here's sort of the big one here. This is how to compare as far as severeness of the rent. And I've got the 50 and the 30 to 49. And so 56% of the people in those occupations are in households that are either moderate or severe burden. So significantly greater. It's 43% for all other occupations. We're getting close here. So continuing along that same vein, I thought I would look at ages. And so here it is broken by age. The dark blue is the 50% plus, and then the 30 to 49 are the lighter ones. And these are households. Are these households? No, these are actually peoples. These are households. People, these are people, I'm sorry, people. And so what you can see here is the 25 to 34 has the bulk. That's also a large part about, if you look at those two industries, I mentioned the sales and the, trying to think of the sales and the restaurant and the accommodations, about 47% of all workers that are 25 to 34 are in those industries. So that's where a preponderance of them are. For simplification, if you look at 14 through 34, that's the millennials majority. Actually, the real millennials are 15 through 35, but we're really capturing 90% of them there. So there's your millennials, and it accounts to like 8,000 there at the 25 to 34. So a significant portion are in homes that are rent burdened.
Question about that slide. So help clarify this bottom group of 14-year-olds and younger with percentage of their income. I'm confused.
They live in a household.
They live in a household.
They live in a household.
So that's the average age of the people in the household here?
Yeah. These are just the age of the people, yeah. So if you're in a household and you answer the survey question, and you're rent burdened, then everybody in that household, even if it's a 1-year-old, is still going to be rent burdened.
So if I have a household that has a 65-year-old and a 1-year-old, which category do I go into?
They're going to go into each one of these categories.
Okay,
these are peoples.
Okay.
These are peoples. I'm sorry.
Okay,
it is a little confusing. These are just people, so the number of people. Good question, though. Good question. So now this is a lead up, and I know we got to get out of here shortly. This is a lead up to something I discovered just the other day that I mentioned the millennials. And I've been doing this in Buncombe County for, like I said, almost 20 years. And the big mantra of Buncombe County is baby boomers, baby boomers. Baby boomers are driving the market, baby boomers are driving the housing market. And that's been true until this recent data that just came out in June, and it's population by age, and this probably shows it better. This is Buncombe County, the net change by generation. And this is probably bound to happen, but the baby boomers are being less influential around here, and the millennials are growing strong. The millennials, who remember, at least half, about 47% of them are in those industries we just mentioned, and who many of them are rent burdened. So we're seeing a real growth in this area. Now, if I had time, I would show you. I did this for Haywood, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania. And this is the only place this is happening. So it's the vibe. It's probably the cool thing about you know, Buncombe County, those other counties are still continuing to attract more baby boomers. Henderson County is not attracting millennials, they're attracting baby boomers. So this is something unique to this area, something where our market's can be a little bit different. And, you know, the old mantra used to be the prices on homes were being bid up by the Floridians or the New Yorkers who were cashing out at, you know, $500,000, and they were coming here and spending $300 and thinking they were going to get a good deal, and that was what was driving the market. Now, I don't know if that is anymore. These people might be driving the market, and that might be why you're hearing more about affordability when you didn't in the past, because we're attracting them here, they're getting jobs here, but a lot of them are getting jobs that are probably not paying that great. Got a couple slides here. I know we want to talk about race and ethnicity. This is just monthly earnings, average monthly earnings, and I've got the red is Buncombe County, and North Carolina, compared to North Carolina, they didn't have the national yet. And the sad but cruel fact is, if you look at the average of all races in North Carolina, there's no group in Buncombe County that gets up to that area. And as you can see, Black or African American is the lowest, and Hispanic follows closely. So there it is visually. The next slide is, I thought was sort of fascinating. I took inflation out of it and looked at the change. And what's fascinating, you may not pick up on right away, is outside of Native Hawaiian, which believe me, there are not many Native Hawaiians in Buncombe County. Everybody else is moving the same direction as the state, which is, you know, I think that would be somebody ought to write a paper on that. I would suspect it's because races congregate in different industries, and so maybe that's why there's the movement, but every group sort of moves in the same direction. And as you can see, Black, African American dropped, both state and nation, and American Indian did as well. And actually pretty good growth on the Hispanic and Latino side. I know from looking at that before that they have a high participation in construction and the food services industry, so they're probably benefiting from a return in those industries. We're getting close here. So this is the rent burden for African American, and if you had some time with this, I think it's fascinating because actually the actual number, the 40%, if you look at that, is less than the average white alone, unless you're looking at that very top piece, at the 50% or more. And there's probably, I would love for someone to pay me to figure out why that is. I'm going to guess, and you may say I'm really off here, but those of you that have lived here longer than I would know this, that the Black African American population has a longer historical presence here and is relatively clustered locally, and there hasn't been a big increase of Blacks moving into the area. So that may play a role, and then especially now you compare it to Hispanic, whole different profile. If you look at the two together, they've got a whole different thing going on, which is fascinating to me and doesn't probably help you at all. So the last couple slides here are going to be on worker flows. This is I love doing this when I do different communities. This is sort of an oddball data set that just came up a few years ago. Most communities don't know it. Your community, our community, is a little more sophisticated than most, but I usually blow them away when I show them that most of the people that work in their community don't even live there. So here you can see, I've got two more slides that break this out a little bit easier, but you can see the trend is obviously living and employed in Buncombe County has declined and sort of flattened out. In commuters, that's the yellow line, has been increasing pretty consistently, as has people out commuting. Now, this is probably an easier way to look at it. Here we zero it out, and you can see actually the number of people that live and work in Buncombe County has declined. And it's sort of flattened out since the recession, has not increased. And so the increase in employment is actually due to more in-commuters. It's only 57% of the people that are in the labor force live and work in the county. So the other 43% are like me. I live in Haywood County, and that's a trend that seems to be increasing. And the last slide will be the shocker. I'm working with Henderson County. Henderson County has not, I said their total employment is still well below pre-recession. It's because they're all coming up here for jobs. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's definitely a significant change. Now, when you get into the whole affordability, I think it would be interesting if somebody had the time to figure out, is one of the reasons that they're doing that is because housing costs are so expensive here. Most people don't choose for long commutes if they don't have to, unless there's some reason for that, and housing price might be a reason for that. So really quickly, this is sort of my summary, my guess, what I think is important. You might have found something else. Steady growing number and percent of rent burdened houses. Look back 9 years, it continues to grow pretty steadily. Impact growing on middle income homes, so it's not just low, that rent burden is working its way up into middle income. Strong employment growth, you probably already knew that, but that doesn't match the next one, which is wages are low and there's been no growth, or look at occupations, actually a decline in wages. Much of the recent job growth is in those low-wage industries and low-wage occupations. Those low-wage and high growth are more likely, unsurprisingly, to be rent burdened. The millennials are also more likely to be rent burdened, and we're seeing more of them. African American, Black, Hispanic populations have comparatively lower earnings, and each one of them, when you come up to the affordability issue, seems to have their own unique profile of what's happening. So it's a little bit different going on there. I definitely didn't get anywhere near answering that. And then finally, Buncombe County is increasingly attracting in commuters, and the people that live and work here is becoming a smaller and smaller portion. So with that, and I apologize, I've gone over time here.
No, you're good.
Am I okay?
You're good.
Okay.
I would have gabbled you if you weren't. This is so good, Tom.
You're a groupie.
I'm always just in awe of how simple you can make economics. If you had taught me economics, I probably would have loved it.
I appreciate it. Well, you know, this is just data.
Yeah, but let's have a few comments, because what we need to do between now and 1:30 is have a few comments. Next month, we're gonna have the panel back to talk to us, and then we also need to do our quick financial report at the end here. So what comments do you have that are burning? Anybody? Guest, audience, board? Stephanie?
I have a lot. I mean, I just can't organize them all into a stream of thought. I just with some of the things, you know, I've been learning since I moved over to the School of Pharmacy and really focusing, you know, on rural health, is watching the rural counties around us are shrinking in population. You know, the dynamics of their employment is very different than ours. And so, you know, how that is going to continue to shape what happens in this county and that commuting. And, you know, one of the questions I had as we looked at those in commuters is, I wonder how far the average person drives, you know, commuting in from outside, because gas prices have been lower. So you wonder.
Interrupt. I think Scott asked for me to map out where those people live, and I was going to give that to Scott. So I'll have that.
I just think that's very interesting in terms of how far is someone willing to come, and then if gas prices begin to change, how will that then impact, you know, our ability to perhaps support those communities. And as we think about rural communities and, you know, the culture we have in the mountains, people are very tight-knit and close with their families. And lots of times they don't want to leave that community, you know, where they grew up, but yet the better job is, you know, outside their county.
Yeah, anecdotally, I live in Weaverville, and I noticed that over the 20 years I've lived there, the traffic coming out of Asheville in the evening has dramatically increased. And that's just my observation. I try to avoid the highway at that time now.
By the way, I didn't talk about population, and just FYI, population, it's one of the few counties where population has grown every year. You can get good annual data back in 1969. Buncombe County's never lost population, it just continues. So you put money in the bank, it's gonna
And
increase.
that continues to be in migration.
Yeah, yeah, it's,
Was why you heard that in the video, people who moved here for
Yeah.
opportunity, that's where I read.
now the surrounding counties, that's all they have going for them. Buncombe County does have some natural growth, meaning births over deaths, but the majority of it is people moving in. So those, you know, there again, back to those millennials, that's why that really caught my eye, because historically it's been the baby boomers, and now it looks like it's gonna be the millennials.
And how do we, as a community, keep our send our brightest to college and get them back here instead of sending them to Charlotte Way?
Don't let them look at the wage chart, that's for sure.
I think it would be interesting to take this, there's been, I'm trying to remember the guy that did the study, he's from down east at one of the universities, but it's about our dying counties. And it's how we're aging out, yeah.
Disturbing
okay.
demographics.
And how we could look at this and overlay it, because he talks a lot about the Hispanic community being our workforce for the future, which we're demonstrating here. And then to take into account our in-commuters, which we all know that if you work in a county, basically that's where you seek services. And so again, the retail and the things that we're seeing grow, and we've got this. So it's a pro and a con as to what's happening, and really look at, are we going to change the predictions that he had, because it looks like our trends are different than what he projected was going to happen with aging counties. So that'd be really cool to see what the opportunities are there, and if we're actually following that projection, or if we're setting a new pace.
Buncombe County is unique if you look at the western part of the state. I mean, on the positive side.
To expand a little bit on that bone report that you mentioned earlier, that the city of Asheville did, we did that, that's for the 4-county region that we're in, it includes Buncombe County, and one of the stressors on the affordable housing piece is the baby boomer aging into retirement. That the baby boomers that are here, that have been here, are aging into the 55 plus in the next 5 to 10 years, and so the need for senior affordable housing in that category is gonna dramatically increase because of that shift. So it doesn't, you know, we don't know what the millennials are gonna do. I mean, they're here, but there is a different, you know, so what does that mean for the system?
What are they gonna do?
What does it mean for the system, you know, that there are this big, you know, substantial, stable group of folks moving into this aging category? What does that mean for services that are gonna be needed? They're retiring and gonna need affordable housing at retirement. So what does that mean for retirement, you know, those kinds of things, and that's very true for Buncombe County, and those numbers are very clear, and it's a big balloon over the next 5 to 10 years, so that's gonna mean something significant for us.
I know one thing I've looked at, which doesn't tie in, but it ties into what you're saying, was sources of income for communities. So you've got wages, you've got government transfers, which is Social Security and that sort of thing, and then you've got a couple other investments and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of communities that are almost, not all, but majority of it is transfers, government transfers. And I did some work in Lake Havasu, and they're almost all that, it's much retirees. And the problem in economic development is that they can't get anything done because nobody is tied to the community. You know, they're just in the coffee shops or shopping, and then they say, you know, we have a capital campaign and we want to do something. You know, they don't feel it. And there's no upper end. You know, you get your check in the mail, your Social Security check or your retirement check, and so there's not a lot of excitement. So that's, I think, that's probably a national problem. Unfortunately, we don't have that here, but some of the surrounding counties do.
So with all the growth of the hospitality industry and other industries, is it possible to get the figures of how much they have grown and their profits compared to the wages staying stagnant? Is it possible to do that?
To get profits for them?
Well, to see their growth, their rate of growth compared to the workers' rate of growth.
Like ownership? You're talking about ownership?
No, their profit margin, how much they've, as their businesses grow.
Well, probably not locally, but I mean, you could probably look at maybe statewide or something. I could look around for it.
Same analogy you made with manufacturing, which is sometimes we look at the average wage, when really you have the engineers here.
Yeah, I mean, the composition of what makes a restaurant or.
And I guess what comes to mind is a company like Engels, their growth compared to even their average wages.
You're trying to see how much they're investing in their workforce.
Right.
Are they increasing their wages along with how they're?
I could.
Well, and if you go back though to the administrative services, which shows from what I think we heard you say that we're contracting and using folks so that we don't have to provide benefits, what that means, because our charity care at Mission Health is going up out the wazoo with people with no care, and even with the ACA, there's still the hurt that's there. So it'd be great to kind of correlate all of it to your point. That would really give some insight as to what truly is the impact.
I could see if this gets, I could look at the change in the occupations in the industries relative to each other, which I didn't really look at here. And maybe the composition of who they are, like how many dishwashers there were 10 years ago to now, or in the internal composition might have changed a bit too. I've got to think the accommodations, the way they're staffed and the payment internally has probably changed over time.
I think that's the problem, is that there isn't an investment in employees, that there could be.
As the father of 2 millennials, I'll agree with Heather, we don't know what they're gonna do. But I wanna draw a distinction between the households and the income of the wages and what policy, what direction for housing units and housing development that takes us. For example, when I hear a growth in the aging of the population, which is true, not because they're moving in, as Heather said, but because all of y'all are getting older, I'm not, but you know, that doesn't say to me that I need to build more elderly housing. It just needs that I need inclusive housing, because 20 or 30% of our so-called family apartments end up being occupied by elderly. They're mixed. Many of the elderly don't choose to live in dedicated elderly apartments. The other thing that I want to always remind folks is that the wage doesn't always tie to the household income, because you might have 2 earners. You've made that point today. But the affordability of a 2-earner household is huge and hugely improved compared to the housing affordability of a 1-earner household. If you and the people you live with and around you, you might be a $24,000 a year household if you're 1 earner, but all of a sudden you're a $48,000 if you have a new relationship or a child that gets older and stays living there. And you've done what I've never seen today, which is you've kind of interplayed the census data about household income with the occupation data. I've never been able to connect that, and I appreciate you looking. It opens us up to a more sophisticated look of who we're serving and who we need to be serving.
Thanks. See, the census asked your occupation. That's what I thought about with tying the two together. And I didn't show you the slides, and you would know this better than me, Scott, but there has been and I don't know the numbers, a movement towards more people living by themselves. So if you look over the last few years, there's more and more single people in a house by themselves.
One of the other things too is, as far as millennials and as far as those that are aging, that you're gonna have to look at in this equation, is you're gonna have to look at the size of the structure. People are moving to smaller houses. They don't want the big mansions anymore. The millennials, if you talk to them, they don't want the homes that, you know, their mom and dad built, and this monster thing that they're trying to maintain. So an affordable house that may be $150,000, you know, next year may be 800 square feet, 900 square feet, 1,100 square feet, as opposed to in '85, that house was 2,100 square feet. And as we look at meeting the needs of those in Buncombe County, I see looking at the size of the home will be as big a part of this equation as anything else. When you analyze all of that, we're going to need quite a bit more smaller homes in Buncombe County.
Thank you, Commissioner. One last comment.
With the millennials, what is their education? Would you be able to figure that out? Do they have degrees or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know top of my head, but you can do that.
I think income level too is important, because there's a lot of millennials that are working for manufacturing. They went to those, you know, some of them are welders, some of them are skilled labor, what's referred to as that, and they are making, quite a bit of income. So I think you'd want to know the income level also.
Well, thank you.
If you have other data questions you want Tom to look at before the next meeting, let us know.
Thank you so
great.
much. We, as always, this conversation is going to go on now for 2 more meetings. So if you think of something that you want to know or your question you have, just jot it down and bring it back to the next meeting. I want to acknowledge the presence of Assistant County Manager John Creighton, who came in. We're glad to have you with us, John. And Jim, let's say some financials.
I doubt I'll get the
And
same
any of our
applause
guests
for
who are
that.
not fascinated by this, we will not. Run.
Although it is fascinating.
It is.
It is fascinating.
So we are 2 months into our fiscal year, or about almost 17% of the fiscal year. So we'll look at the HHS financial expenditures for DSS first. And you see, if you look at the graph, you can see that we're, this is where we should be, 16 2/3. This is where our actuals are. As we pointed out before, for Home and Community Care Block Grant, those are funds that we pay out to Land of Sky for administration of our contracts. We pay those funds out 50% first. And then under administration, you see we're above. Those are expenses that we pay, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation insurance that we pay. As we look at that amortized over the course of the year, you see, however, that we're well within budget and under budget of where we were even last year. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about DSS expenditures. So we'll do the same thing with public health, and we'll look at those, and we'll see, 2 months doesn't a trend make, so we're very early in the year. But the same, essentially where we were are with that, with expenditures. When we take out the one-time expenditures for the year, you see we're under budget and actually better than we were last year. So happy to answer any questions that you might have on either public health or DSS expenditures.
Thank you. Are there any other items that need to come to our attention?
We will post the electronic version of it for y'all on your screen.
Anything else? Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who still needs a flu shot, it's 404 on the